Yeah, I would love to. I feel like my story has been 50 years in the making, which is how old I am. I turned 50 last month. And like a lot of people, maybe all of us who experienced really severe childhood trauma in our early adult life, we don't recognize why we're struggling the way we do. When we experience a lot of adversity as kids, we have to cope by suppressing. So my coping style was suppress, deny, people please, perfectionism. And so when we learn to cope like that as kids to get through really tough times, then we cope with our adult life in the very same way. So my experience as an adult, as a young adult, is I became very high achieving. I sought advanced degrees. I sought being well known in my field and my profession because I had this idea if people could validate me externally, I would feel better. Because all the while I was dealing with really severe depression, anxiety. I just really didn't believe in myself. And it affected my relationships, it affected my health. From the time I was at least 18, I had chronic health issues, issues with pain, issues with fatigue. I had all kinds of really unpleasant symptoms. And again, like a lot of people with childhood trauma, I went from doctor to doctor trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And like you said, our society just really doesn't understand the connection between how we function with our limitations in life and what it had to do with how we grew up. So I became even further traumatized by dealing with a medical system for a couple decades that really didn't understand me. And so I just want to send some extra love to people who've been in that position because it's hard enough to deal with so much pain and illness and insecurity and then be blamed for it by a system we go to for help. So that went on, Wendy, for probably 20 years. And finally my health got to a point where I couldn't function anymore. I'm a therapist by training. And one day I couldn't go into the office. Like I had crossed the threshold by which I just couldn't really live my life very well at all anymore. And that was a great turning point for me because it really forced me into a space where I had to heal myself. So one of the good things about being a perfectionist is that it made me really determined to figure things out. Like I didn't give up on myself with really a lot of odds stacked against me after trying forever, feeling very helpless, feeling very alone. I, we all have to figure out what our why is. And for me, my why was my children. I found myself parenting in ways that didn't reflect what I really wanted to do. And so a combination of my desire to be a really loving mother and in combination with my desire to feel better physically and emotionally in my life, I figured it out. And I will tell you the one thing that was really a turning point for me was creating a vision board. And I'll tell you why this helped because I didn't realize what was possible for me. And I saw an episode of Oprah, and there were three women on the show with their vision boards. And I can't tell you how powerful this was for me because a light bulb went off in my head because there was a woman on the stage with her poster, and there was a picture of Oprah on her vision board. And
Wow.
that helped me to see like, wow, like that's pretty miraculous that she made that happen. And so right after I saw that, I made this huge vision board, and I kind of said to the universe, like, if I'm going to be here, this is the life I want to live. As I sort of showed this artwork that I made with all the things I'd been longing for that I couldn't achieve in my life, which is just personal fulfillment and peace, essentially. And so that really changed my trajectory. It was like the universe saw that I finally meant it, that I wanted to heal. And as I stayed focused on that vision, all kinds of resources came upon my path, different practitioners, listening to different stories, podcasts, interviews, and that helped me get a lot of momentum going in the direction of well being. And so I've spent the last 10 years really healing myself, really understanding the art form of healing. And what's so beautiful is being a therapist, a trauma therapist, is I've been able to use what I learned to heal myself to work with clients in all kinds of ways in group settings and individual settings. And it's profoundly fulfilling to both create this sense of joy in my life that I never thought was possible and to now know how to help other people do that as well.
I love what you just said about the art of healing. I think that's a great book. Someone must have written a book called The Art of Healing. If not, quick, grab the domain name. I know you've just written a book.
Yes. Yeah, I did. The last 3 years I spent telling my own story of trauma recovery, and the guide that I use in my work with clients, I put it in a book, and it's profoundly healing to write your story. I felt my symptoms just dissolve as I put my words on the page and shared it with people, because there's so much secrecy with trauma, especially when there's incest in families, and we're so conditioned not to tell, which is so toxic for our whole psyche, for our body. Holding things in is just completely destructive. And so being able to tell your story in a really empowered way, I had to wait until I had worked through a lot of anger and resentment that I was holding on to, because I didn't want to bring a book into the world that had a lot of anger and hate in it. And, part of my healing journey has required me to really make sense of why things happened, to get myself out of that place of feeling like I was victimized by life, by my family, by other people, because we really can't be free as long as we're holding on to that belief that we're victims.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at something yesterday, and I was thinking that as much as this person thinks that they're healed and they're helping others and healing, they're actually still very much in a victim mode. And we all do it.
Yes.
And then surrounding themselves with people that are going to reinforce that story of being a victim.
Yes.
And just reliving in that space that isn't necessarily going to serve them. And I think it's so powerful what you said about, you wanted to write the book not from a place of being angry, you didn't use the word toxic, but the word toxic is what's come up in my head, because I've written my own book as well, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I would like to think that I haven't done what we've said and had all, I'm hoping that I've written it in a way. I know it's a hard read, but I've written it in a way where that toxicity isn't coming out and leaking out into other people, because ultimately I never want that, not intentionally, to do that.
And there's always deeper levels of healing for us to achieve. And so a book that I might write 3 years from now could be even different, more empowering than this book, because the journey never ends. And I know that's hard for some people to hear, but it's also important to recognize that, until we take our last breath, we have the possibility of growing and evolving and creating an even more beautiful life, even more sense of evolution in our own being. So that's the bright side of things, is that we get to keep growing and evolving and healing. And I think it's important to look at that as not the downside, that there is no finish line, because in essence, that's why we're here on the earth, is to grow and evolve and create. And it's cool that never gets to end until our time is over.
And I think it's nice when you step into a space like that. And it's been able to step into a space like that. And it's why I wanted to share these stories, because so many people are stuck in that survival state, are still experiencing and living in the trauma of their past. And it's a bit like what you were saying about, trying to get help within the medical arena for 20 years. That has a devastating long-term effect on decisions you make, how you're looking after yourself, the impact. It's a ripple effect that goes through everything.
Yeah, and it's easy to get really overwhelmed by all the things that happen. And it's understandable why we can get stuck in a victim state, because as kids, we were victimized. Like, that's a fact. And so when we have a hard time moving on, it's because we're wanting people to give us the attention and the validation that we didn't have as kids. But what we have to realize is that it has to come from us. Anything we're seeking outside of ourselves is still causing us to stay in a disempowered state. And so when we realize like we're our own healers, that if we're wanting attention from someone